Many of you will know John Byrne, celebrated Scottish creative genius, a polymath playwright and artist. You'll perhaps have seen his famous trilogy The Slab Boys on the stage, or maybe you watched Robbie Coltrane and Emma Thompson launch their careers in Tutti Frutti back in the 1980s. You may have been lucky enough to catch his major retrospective exhibitions in the Scottish National Portrait Gallery and Kelvin Grove Museum. This film is going to look back before all of this, to the beginnings of his art career, to the artist from Paisley called Patrick, who became Recorder-in-Chief of the Cultural Zeitgeist in 1970 Scotland. In it, we will examine a very special collection of artworks accumulated during this period, which provide an unprecedented insight into this chapter of Byrne's story. "My father doesn't know I'm sending this to you, as he paints for his own enjoyment and does not exhibit his work," began the letter Byrne sent to London's Portal Gallery in 1967. So commenced the infamous ruse in which he got his foot in the door of the London art world by pretending to be a primitive, self-taught artist named Patrick, a 71-year-old retired labourer from Govan. Though he confessed the truth to the directors before it could spin too far out of hand, the gallery continued to collude with Byrne to present him to their buying audience as a fashionable so-called primitive painter, until he was ultimately outed in The Observer as an alumni of above-average sophistication by the Glasgow School of Art itself. He had several successful exhibitions with Portal between 1968 and 1971. Nonetheless, it was grindingly hard to make a living as an artist at this time, and Byrne had a wife and 2 children to support. In steps our collector. This is St. Francis of Assisi, or, as family lore has it, Father Tom Jamieson of Renfrew Parish Church. Father Jamieson was said to cut a bit of a dash for a priest. He was a cultured man and an aesthete. It was only natural then that he and Byrne would end up in each other's orbit. John Byrne's oldest daughter, Celie Byrne, who continues the family profession as a successful practising artist in her own right, recalls this period of their lives in vivid detail.
So I remember Father Jamieson from when I was tiny, and he would come round to the house every now and again. In fact, quite regularly. There was another priest as well, so who was Paisley based, and Father Jamieson was Renfrew based. And he would come round often. They would sit and talk about work, and obviously he went out to the garage looking at my dad's artwork and what he was working on and stuff. And he was I just remember him being really lovely. He had I always remember the stripy scarf, and it looked as if he was straight out of like Oxford University or something. Very swish, very well spoken. I remember that. So when we were wee, we lived on Paisley Road, Renfrew, opposite the Glen Hill Hotel, in a little bungalow, and it's just a main road. We weren't allowed to cross the main road ever. And out the back there was the big garage, probably the length of about 2 cars, where my dad worked every day. And my dad would be out in the garage working early hours in the morning to very late at night, and would come in now and again for his dinner, and my mum would send us out to give him cups of tea. It was always cups of tea, copious amounts of cups of tea, and we would bring in the dirty ones, and usually they were full of like cigarette ends because they were used as an ashtray, or mouldy if we'd forgotten about a cup. And sometimes late at night, he would be working on a big bit of board, usually sort of like about 8 by 8 or something. And he would be standing painting, and I would just be sitting on the same chair that's in my portrait and just like copy whatever he was painting.
From around 1970, Jamieson was to become a staunch supporter of his talented parishioner, regularly attending Byrne's garage studio on Paisley Road. He amassed a significant collection of work, from sketches to monumental oils.
There's the little pencil studies, and there was some in Conti and pastel. When we were either watching television or fast asleep, my dad they were just like little sketches, and usually they would just get crumpled up and dumped in the bin kind of thing. And it was my mum that saved them and flatten them out and get them framed or whatever, or mounted and stuff like that. to him they were just studies, I guess. But my mum, because she took photographs of us all the time, in every moment kind of thing, she was the one that saved them out of the bin. And so we've got a few of them on our wall that have just never been anywhere, never been seen the light of day, apart from if any time they were removed. They were always kept together. So the portrait of me in the chair, that chair's actually, we've just only recently got rid of it, bizarrely enough, because it didn't have any room. So that chair's been there ever since I was tiny, and it sat in front of a desk that my dad painted up as well, the same colour. And my brother and I would be watching a little bit of telly after school, from what I remember, or after tea, and my dad had set up the chair and his easel in the living room, and as soon as it was like, Celie, it's time to, could you sit for me for about an hour or something? It was so miserable. I remember it just seemed to go on forever, and it was quite exhausting. So I've got a huge sympathy for anybody that does life drawing or life modelling and sits to get their painting done or portrait done. So it's quite a skill to sit and stay still for a long time. There's little drawings from our childhood, because my brother and I used to sort of like draw on the walls and stuff. And anytime my mum got a new book, the first thing we would do was like open it and like blank page and draw on it. So I've still got some drawings from when I was wee, from my brother and I being wee. My brother would always draw war, and I would do sort of the bus, because we stayed in the main road, so it was like the bus going up and down.
I mentioned earlier that Byrne captured the zeitgeist of the era, didn't I? How? In the main, because there was an amazing explosion of musical talent emerging from the industrial centres in the west of Scotland at this time. Through a shared love of music and pop culture, Byrne was well networked into the scene and friends with the key protagonists. From Jerry Rafferty and Billy Connolly's Humble Bums to Donovan, Byrne was the go-to designer for their album work.
So Donovan would come round to our house quite often. So I think he might have still been based in Glasgow or something. I do remember him from when I was tiny, and obviously whoever visited, and if my dad was working, it would be straight out to the back garage. It would be through the house and at the back door to the garage, the studio. And obviously they would sit and discuss stuff out there. The project, the old-fashioned picture book, was written by Donovan, from what I remember. I'm pretty sure my dad did the costumes as well as the animation. And I remember, I think it was 71, I think it was the summer of 71. We got taken out, or was it 70? Might have been 71. We got taken out of school slightly early during the summer, and all of a sudden we're off to LA, staying in the Chateau Marmont. And we had I think we had an apartment and sort of like the pool out the back. I remember that. And lots of bunny rabbits early in the morning. So my brother and I would always be up first thing and out to the pool, even though we couldn't swim. And we would get picked up and then be driven, again, it seemed like forever, to Malibu Beach for some filming. And I remember it vividly, getting filmed, and we had to eat cheese. Remember that. And I had to pet this rabbit. I think we did a few takes, but not many. And then the kites, I remember going around up and down the dunes with the kite. And I remember that vividly. I remember my brother being fascinated by movies way back then. And, the film crew, who were really lovely, would show my brother how to record and stuff like that. So this was a kind of tester for Warner Brothers. And I remember Tony Benedict, who was the lead storyboarder, an animator, I think, for the Pink Panther. So of course we just loved him. I think Tony Benedict came out before. He came out to visit us in Renfrew, obviously to get pictures of my brother and myself, because they might have gone with somebody else, I'm not too sure. I think 10 minutes were written by Donovan, and my dad did the animations with the Jabberwocky and stuff.
The largest oil in the collection is heavily influenced by this trip to America, the country Byrne had been enthralled by since his childhood. During the trip, Byrne became disillusioned with his glimpse behind the Hollywood facade, instead developing a fascination with the characters he encountered in the music scene of LA's dive bars. When he returned to Scotland, he produced a series of monumental oils inspired by these experiences. The subtext of many of them are critical of black exploitation and the Vietnam War. The clothing of the musician here is redolent of American Civil War uniform, which potentially alludes to a darker undercurrent of symbolism.
So the following summer, we went out to Ireland, to this big mansion. I think it was just outside of Dublin from what I remember. That's where Donovan settled with Linda and the kids. So we went out for a holiday in the summer, the following summer. And I remember there was Sid. He gave me a little Raggedy Ann doll and my brother a police car, an American police car. And one day, this big black limousine drove up the driveway and it ran over my brother's police car, American police car. And this man in black, all dressed in black, came out, and apparently that was George Harrison. But it was his chauffeur that drove over the little car. I mean, we obviously, but apparently George Harrison had come to the house twice in Renfrew for dinner.
In 1969, Byrne created a painting of the Beatles for his December show at the Portal Gallery that year. This was a reference and reaction to the fact that Portal attracted a starry clientele, with some of the biggest names in British show business of the day becoming frequent visitors, including Michael Caine, David Niven, David Bailey and the Beatles. The painting was purchased by the art director and graphic designer Alan Aldridge, who went on to use it as the frontispiece to the Beatles' illustrated lyrics published in 1969. It was later used as the cover of the Beatles Ballads LP 12 years later. Rumours suggest the original large-scale work was lost by EMI Records, and so this work is a rare, surviving early version. In the image, Byrne represents each Beatle seated beside a sort of spirit animal, perhaps which he felt best approximated their nature. Yoko Ono can be glimpsed in the crystal ball held by John. This significant collection of artworks has remained in Father Jamieson's family by descent, and it is with great pleasure that Lion & Turnbull presents these works on the open market for the first time in our contemporary art sale on the 2nd of April.